That warm, fuzzy glow. For as long as I can remember, I've been captivated by it. Its bleeding, flickering jitteriness, almost like stepping foot into a world long forgotten. Its comforting blurriness of things that might have been, could still be, and will never be again. Often neglected or relegated to the category of hipster fodder, VHS has been one of my longest serving friends for as long as I can physically remember. Whether it was sinking into my first horror movie in my early teens, or Saturday nights catching up on the telly I'd missed for the week, VHS was there, and still there for me to this day. The format's border indestructible. Its case may be mangled, its tape mould-ridden, but with the right care and attention, the humble videotape will outlast you, me, and most of the people who'll watch this video. Had it not been for my obsession with tape in college and university, I almost certainly wouldn't have made it through those courses in one piece. When I first suggested dubbing my then crisp, clean, high-definition film back to tape in 2011, I was heavily criticised for it. At the time I was mixing and mingling with students, lecturers and peers who were spending upwards of £1,200 per 3 days to rent cameras that shot in 2 and 4K, which were a relatively new innovation for the time. And the general consensus was that getting the sharpest, most pinpoint precise image in the highest possible resolution with the flattest colour profile was perfection itself, and that anything less than that was to be ridiculed, or even flat out ignored. The amount of times people would say to me,
"Why on earth do you want to shoot on tape? It'll look shit."
or
"Why bother using actual tape? Why not just stick a load of filters on it? It'll replicate the look."
the honest answer is, well, you can't replicate it. You just can't. You may think you can, but that analogue warmth, that grain, those specific tape faults, those bumps in the road, they just can't be replicated accurately with plugins or filters. You have to do it properly to get the best results. It's the nature of the medium. Each tape is like a snowflake, totally unique, with its own faults, its own imprints, its own history. There'll be sections that have been worn out through multiple watches. There'll be portions with tracking wobbles. It's the nature of the format. It's basic, but it works. VCRs have been around for nearly half a century. Early domestic recorders were being sold in early 1950s Japan. By the 1960s, these machines had made it to Western soil. Though they were prohibitively expensive and often seen as quite a niche device sought after by hobbyists, it wasn't until the mid to late 1970s that domestic VCR finally started to be rolled out for mass public consumption. The genie was at last out of the bottle, and with it a veritable treasure trove of movies. For the first time, members of the public were given the opportunity to watch almost whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, on an almost endless scale. Miss the news at 10? Watch it at 11 when you get in. Late night art film that you can't stay up for? Tape it, watch it while you're having your tea the next day. Sure, it wasn't the sharpest, cleanest format in the world, but the freedom it unlocked was astounding. And since it was usurped by DVD, no other format outside of illegal torrenting has really offered that kind of freedom since. Sure, there were attempts with DVD recorders, but the restrictions that came with them over tape were manifold. From resilience, just one scratch on a DVD and it might not play ever again, to formatting related issues, to even simple things like reusability. DVDs just couldn't hold up to the versatility that tape had to offer. It's a very forgiving format in many ways. It can be directly linked to the success of multiple films through the 70s, 80s and 90s. Many video nasties such as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Cannibal Holocaust. Even mainstream films like The Evil Dead or Nightmare on Elm Street probably wouldn't have had half of the recognition that they do today had it not been for the medium of VHS. It helped to sell the realism, both of the films themselves and their effects. To watch Cannibal Holocaust on Blu-ray, you can very clearly see what's fake and how fake it is. To watch it on tape, well, you're not just watching the events unfold, you're experiencing a real massacre. Through the snowstorm of fuzz, what when sharpened are merely rubber dummies being tortured and impaled, seem all that more real in the tape world. The Wicker Man on Blu-ray is pure theatricality, but on tape, well, you're sat with Howie in that burning man, and those flames feel warm in ways that picture-perfect versions could never begin to approach. By the mid to late 1980s, movies actually banked on VHS's lower resolution, producing films with effects that looked awful on film, but fantastic on domestic tape. They knew their customers would most likely experience the film that way, so they took liberties. They began to plan for how films would look on tape over how they'd look in the cinema. And only adding to that sense of low-res realism was the bootleg market, in which a tape would be copied, sent to a friend, who'd then copy it, send it to a friend, who'd then copy it. And all the while the original tape signal would deteriorate down and down as the distance from the original source grew further and further away, until all that was left was a murmuring kaleidoscope of lights and noise. Some of my closest friends will attest that some of their fondest memories were sitting up at 3 a.m, watching a 5th or 6th generation copy of a horror or sci-fi film they'd wanted to see for years. And they'd just be happy at the idea that they could watch their favourite film in the comfort of their own home for the first time. By the mid-1980s, alongside domestic recorders, video cameras had now arrived. And for the first time, people were able to document family occasions, record treasured moments, or even make their own movies. It was from this innovation that we ended up with films like Tales from the Quaded Zone and Things, two movies that were shot entirely on tape. Again, as I mentioned, even though both of these films look and sound awful, VHS is terrifically merciful, blurring some of the worst effects and smoothing over the cracks in production with an effortless slathering of wooziness. As the 80s moved into the 90s, tape's prominence only grew from strength to strength, though it was to be cut down in the mid-90s, however, when DVD became the new kid in town, and videotape slowly but surely worked its way into obscurity in the face of a shinier and slimmer future. On the camera front, the tapes got smaller, and eventually they were replaced altogether. In fact, the first camera I ever bought with my own money was a mini DV Samsung handheld, and it saw me through most of my time in education and beyond. It helped me make half a dozen films and at least a couple of features. Today I keep it on display in my room, a reminder to me that format is as important to a film's success as a script or direction. I'd never dream of parting with it. By the early 2010s, format wasn't really up for discussion. If you used VHS tape, it was for documentary in the form of archive, and that was it. And that attitude seemed to prevail throughout most of the professionals I'd work with. It wasn't so much a dismissal, more a rabid refute, a rejection of a format deemed past it. I made it the subject of one of my reports when I studied at university, showing a portion of one of my short films, first in HD and then again in VHS. It was night and day. The HD copy was blotchy, overly crisp, and honestly looked like crap. But there was something about that processing, that passing from one format to another. It just smoothed everything out. The faults, rather than being faults, became part of the piece, part of the direction. It was like making something real for the first time, and that cold and overly sharp picture was suddenly replaced with something altogether warmer and much more human to me. After my presentation, I felt like I'd opened a dialogue, that it was okay to work with the format that you felt best suited your film. And it's a belief I still hold to this day. If your film suits an older formatting as its medium, go authentic. If you want it to feel more like a late 90s, early 2000s, rough and ready kind of film, buy a mini DV camera and dub it back and forth a bit. If you want that shot on video feel, pick up a VCR and get experimenting. The authenticity will reward you back in spades more than any filter or colour correction ever could. Don't be afraid to experiment, because a film that looks awful, super clean, may just be one dub away from being a masterpiece. Today, the collectible VHS and VCR market is booming, with tapes being bought and sold for many hundreds, and in some cases thousands of dollars. There's a reason for it, apart from the people buying them for an investment. It's because tapes of that time hold a feeling that's totally unique. They feel genuine. They feel of the experience as much as, say, the casting or the direction is. They're an important part of our historical legacy, and it astounds me just how many people will still just shrug and bin these artefacts, these important pieces of our cultural identity. I currently operate 2 collections. Films I love, I buy on Blu-ray and then again on VHS. I think there's something to be said about seeing a film in both mediums, because they each offer their own takes on the experience. With Blu-rays, I admire the attention to detail, the quality, the meticulous clarity of seeing a movie in such a way that you would otherwise have to go to a theatrical screening to achieve. But I also buy VHS for the roughness, the smoothness, the noise, the warmth, the bleeding colour palettes, the almost tangible feeling of the unknown in terms of how the tape's going to play out, the whir of the VCR as it gently hums away in the distance. It can make me think about a movie in a completely different way, and I totally appreciate that. Now, I don't expect I'll change any opinions with this video, and frankly I wouldn't want to. VHS's day was had long ago, and I would never in a million years be arguing that it should have a resurgence again in the same way that vinyl has. But that doesn't mean it should be totally forgotten. It, alongside other formats, should be remembered, should be utilised while it still can be. If anything, in a world that strives for perfection and crystal clarity, I think we should embrace tape for what it is. A different world, a different time, all encapsulated in that warm, fuzzy glow.